Okay, let's see. Broadcast, YouTube, just on time, just by 8 o'clock. Okay, start broadcast. Here we go. Okay, I think we are live. Let me just double check the health of the stream and make sure everything's looking good. All right, what's up, everybody? Looks like we're here. It looks like we're live. So here it is, finally, the debate with Godless Engineer. I like to call him Soulless Engineer or Ad Hom Engineer. I'm sure he has a thing or two to say about my mustache, but that's okay. Let me just double check. Everything looks like it's good. Okay, well, listen, John, why don't you go ahead and maybe just introduce yourself real quick to my viewers?
Okay. Well, so hi, I'm the Godless Engineer, and I run the YouTube channel with my fiance, KC. But I'm the one that produces all the content there. But I'm Godless Engineer. I'm also on Facebook at Godless Engineer. I'm on Twitter, Godless Engineer. So thanks for doing this conversation slash debate kind of thing with me.
Hey, man, I appreciate you coming on. This should be fun. Okay, so before we kind of get into it, I guess I just want to reestablish the sort of agreement that we had in advance, which was I'm not going to have and you're not going to have any Discord, any text message groups. You're not going to have any backup or any help from anybody. It's just my mind versus your mind. Is that right, John?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have, I'm simulcasting it on my channel too, so
Okay.
I mean, there's the
Well,
comment section, but I mean, other than that,
well, you know what? I'm gonna hide my chat, and so I won't be able to look at my chat. And you should probably do the same. So it's the way we agreed to, just my mind versus yours.
okay. Well,
Because
I am
the
not.
people in the chat, are going to be giving us, they're going to be rooting for us and giving us all types of answers. So I think it's best if we just stick mind to mind.
Well, I mean, I feel like on the fly, it's a little hard to, like get those kind of answers from the chat. So, I mean, generally, I don't. I try. I don't look to the chat to get my
Well,
answers. If I don't know
that's fine,
something, I'll
but you
just
don't
say
have to
that.
have the chat up, right? Like, it's
Huh?
not necessary. You don't have to have the chat up. Like, I just minimized it. I'm not going to be looking at the chat, so you can do the same, right?
Well, yeah. I don't have it up. I don't have it like.
Okay. Right. I just want to make sure, as we agreed, that it's your mind versus my mind with no backup, no babysitters in the background giving us answers, none of that stuff. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. So now that I got you on that, that's great. Well, John, here's the problem, man. I'm a globe skeptic. You've called me a flat earther before, but I don't call myself a flat earther yet. I'm just a globe skeptic. Um, I found too many holes with what they tell us as proofs of the spinning ball.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's what started me on this journey of skepticism, and that's why I'm here. So I don't know if you have anything to say in response to that.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of curious as to what specifically, you have issues with, I guess, because I mean, see, for me, it's kind of, I mean, it's settled science, and plus the fact that there's um, mountains of evidence for it, really. So I don't understand like what.
Are you still there?
Huh?
No, sorry, you cut off for a second.
Oh. Uh so I mean I don't understand what like what you could not be convinced of. So I'm just kind of curious, like what is like one of the hangups that you have, or what's your best hangup? Or
Yeah. Well, here's what happened, man. So I was born and raised to think we live on a spinning ball in space like everybody else. Through the public schooling system, through the social conditioning, it's what pretty much most people believe. As you know, most people. I mean, I don't know what the statistical poll numbers are, but I think most people think they live on a spinning ball flying through space. The problem is some of the most slam dunk proofs that they present to us in school, like ships disappearing bottom up, for example, turns out that after flat earthers started asking those questions about these slam dunk proofs, it turns out that now the globe side has to present all these big caveats and asterisks next to the old slam dunk proofs. For example, ships disappearing bottom up. Bill Nye the Science Guy in his old kids show, in the textbooks, when they talk about the ancient Greeks and how the ancient Greeks observed ships disappearing bottom up, and clearly that's how you know that we live on a spinning ball, because things are disappearing behind the curvature. Turns out now sometimes ships aren't disappearing bottom up. Indeed, sometimes buildings aren't disappearing bottom up. And now the big caveat that now they're telling us about, that now the globe defenders are telling us about now, is refraction. So if you can see a boat or a lighthouse that's supposed to be hidden by Earth's curvature, but it turns out you can see basically the whole thing, it's because refraction is the lighthouse. Now, I don't deny that refraction is a real thing, but I find it interesting. You asked me, why would I ever become a globe skeptic? I find it very fascinating that the slam dunk proofs that they presented as is, ships disappear bottom up, Bill Nye said it, that's it, there's your proof. There's a big caveat. There's a big, oh wait, we forgot to tell you, sometimes it looks flat. It doesn't look like it's disappeared behind curvature, and refraction is bending it up. And before I finish this, let me just add the one other quick thing. Another good example of how they move the globe post. They moved the globe post when flat earthers started looking into it was with Eratosthenes. And it turns out that Eratosthenes' 2 wells were not sufficient to prove the shape of the earth, let alone assuming the sun is 93 million miles away and the light rays come in parallel. Putting all that aside, Neil deGrasse Tyson came out and said, oh shit, in response to flat earthers, oh, he actually needed 3 wells to prove it's an Earth. 2 wells are insufficient. So that's what I'm talking about. This sort of moving the globe post and always having these caveats and asterisks that they don't tell you about in school. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, are you done?
Yep.
Okay, hold on. I'm finishing up a note real quick.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so let me start from the first thing. So could you explain that the role, to, at least in your eyes, that refraction plays when you're looking at something from like across, like if you're trying to look at something across water or even across land, even though refraction has a little bit less of an effect there, when you're looking across water and you're seeing something and it's disappearing from bottom up or whatnot, like what role do you think refraction plays in that?
Well, according to the Globers, it's downward refraction. Downward refraction is causing, for example, the lighthouse that I've observed is causing. So if, for example, you go out and you see a lighthouse that's supposed to be hidden by the Earth's curvature, but it's not, they say, the globe side says that that's downward refraction. And I don't deny that refraction is a real thing. I just find it very fascinating that that's not what they tell you when they say ships disappear bottom up as slam dunk proof that we live on a globe.
Okay, so I guess I don't get why refraction is causing you to doubt the ships going over the curve, because I mean like there is noticeable refraction happening, like even in your video that you posted, I believe it was earlier today maybe.
Oh, God.
Where you saw the boat and it was like refracted, like you could tell because there was a reflection, and I mean that's caused by refraction.
Which video are you talking about? Are you talking about the one where it's like the most shocking flat Earth proof, and I zoom in on a little boat?
Well, I mean, you uploaded a video today where you were reviewing comments on that particular video.
Yeah.
So you like I don't understand why refraction causes you to doubt. that particular
No,
explanation.
I'm not saying that refraction causes me to doubt. I'm talking about moving of the globe post. You asked me, why have I become a globe skeptic? And the reason is because of the never ending moving of the globe post by the globe side, such as they present objects disappearing into the distance bottom up due to obstruction, curvature of the earth. They present that as slam dunk proof. But now that there's a flat earth debate happening, thanks to the internet, which they want to censor and shut down, at least
Well,
the flat earth
can
debate.
I
At
correct you
least
on
the flat
something real
earth, at
quick?
least the flat earth debate element of it.
Can I
So they
correct you
moved
something
the
on something
goalposts
real
and they
quick?
said it's because bottom up obstruction, but it's not, because now they're saying it's actually refraction is lifting it up. So that's my point. Refraction is real. Refraction exists. Refraction is real.
Okay,
But
hold on.
go
Hey,
ahead.
sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
need to correct you on something real quick.
Yep.
So, actually, Samuel Rowbotham in the late 19th century is the one that started this whole questioning the shape of the Earth, and that persisted throughout the 20th century, leading us up to today. Now, the quote unquote flat Earth revolution or whatnot that happened online, true, that didn't start until about 2010 or so, but there were adherents to the whole flat Earth theory after Rowbotham.
Yeah, I'm
And
not talking about Robotham. I'm talking about the modern internet version. Yeah.
well, I mean, it's a little disingenuous to act like it only recently started when it's
I
actually
never
been
said it
happening since the
recently
late
started.
19th
I'm talking
century.
about, I never said it recently started. I'm talking about the internet version of it, which is unlike anything we've seen in the history of flat Earth. Samuel Rowbotham's one dude with a book. I'm talking about this crazy hive mind of people debating this topic every week, like you and I are doing. That's what I was talking about.
Well, no, I understand that's what you're talking about, but I mean, you have to understand that, like, it wasn't just like Samuel Rowbotham said some crazy shit and then he died out, and then all of a sudden, boop, it popped up again. I mean, the ideas that Rowbotham put out there persisted throughout the 20th century, albeit not in a very mainstream way and or a very visible way or whatnot.
That's
But
what I'm talking about.
I know that's not what you're talking about. I know you're talking about. Anyways, we're getting wrapped up in that.
Yeah,
Um,
indeed we
so
are.
so the you said earlier that it's been shown now that things do not disappear from bottom up on occasion, that they actually disappear. How?
So, yeah, sometimes they disappear bottom up. Sometimes they're fully visible.
Well, no, it's either they disappear bottom up or do they disappear from top down, left to right, right to left?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, here's the funny thing is that, and well, I wouldn't attribute this to flat earthers, but it turns out that things on the horizon is far more complex than just Bill Nye the Science Guy telling people, and on his kid show, showing a little demonstration of a ship disappearing bottom up. It's a lot more complicated than that. Turns out the horizon and the way vision and light works at distance is a far more complicated thing than simply telling people ships disappear bottom up at distance, buildings disappear bottom up at distance. We live on a globe. Turns out it's a lot more complicated than that. Turns out you have miraging effects. You have things like the inferior mirage, which I've documented a million times with my P1000, where right above the waterline at the horizon, you have this mirrored inverted effect, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And it will literally obstruct the bottom portion of buildings, trees, and things you're looking at in the distance. And it's a real phenomenon, and it's a real thing. So it's a lot more complicated than that. You have
What
instances where
causes that?
I'm sorry.
What causes that?
What causes inferior mirages?
Yes.
What causes it?
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
Well, I'm asking you, what causes it?
But I mean, I asked you first. If you don't know, that's fine. Just say you don't know.
Oh, you know?
I do know.
Oh, go for it.
Are you saying that you
Oh,
don't
actually, you
know?
know what? Actually, you know what? Um, let me give it a shot first, and since you're going to try to use that as a gotcha moment, let me
I'm
let,
not
let me
trying
give
to.
it a shot.
I'm not trying to use it as a gotcha
Okay,
moment or
that's
anything
fine.
like
That's
that. I'm
fine. That's
just. I'm
fine.
just
But let me
asking.
give
I'm
it.
just trying to see if you
That's
don't
fine. Let
know.
me give it a shot. I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a shot because I've looked into it, but not enough to recount it off the top of my head. From my understanding, these miraging effects, including I think the inferior mirage, it's actually a trick of the mind, from what I understand. And it has to do because I believe the human brain assumes that light travels in straight lines. And so when light is being refracted, it's bending, right? It's changing its direction. And so I believe that the actual inferior mirage is not a it's not like a tangible thing taking place out there per se. It's part based on the mind messing with light as it processes it. So there's my shot.
Okay. Well, I mean, the reason why is because of refraction, but I mean, it's not necessarily a trick of the mind. It's just the way that the information is being broadcasted to you through the light. I mean that like it inverts the image. Like that's I mean that's just what happens. That's how light is propagated like over water, so to say. I mean, you get the same effect when you have long stretches of road. The light bends over it, and you see basically a mirage, like an upside down sort of mirage coming over the other side because of how the light bends over the curvature of the Earth.
Right. But isn't it also part isn't it also part the mind is like your brain is flipping? I mean, I definitely think that's the case with the superior mirages. Um, but I don't think it's just the light is bending and that's what it looks like to your eyes. I think the brain kind of has it has a way of interpreting refracted light that it causes the miraging effects, from my understanding.
Okay, well, I mean, it's not a trick of the brain or anything like that. It's just how we perceive the light that's coming over the curve of the Earth. But I get that you don't believe in the curve of the Earth, so I'm kind of curious. Why do you think that stuff disappears bottom up?
Well, let me again correct you there. It's not that I don't believe in the curve of the Earth. I'm a globe skeptic. I'm open-minded to the globe being to the notion that we live on a ball. I'm very open-minded to that. I am not completely a flat earther. I don't call myself a flat earther. Um, I'm just on the fence right now. That genuinely is what I am. So there may be curvature. I just want to see it. I just want concrete, tangible proof. And every time I go out with my P1000 and I look out there, I don't just get Bill Nye telling me, hey, things disappear bottom up. We live on a globe. Sometimes I go out there, and according to you guys, the things that I'm looking at are looming up. They're refracting up, and I can suddenly see what's supposed to be hidden behind curvature. So I just want something that's concrete, and that's what I can't get. I can't get concrete proof that we live on a globe. Just can't find it. I've been looking. I can't find it. Please show me some actual proof. And show me something that can be tested, not pictures from something that no one can falsify.
Okay. Well, I mean, you can legit watch like a couple of types of videos that exist out there that show like the curvature of the Earth and how the light bends over it and the effects of the curve of the Earth. And so sorry, I had KC come and get me a beer since we're just having a common discussion. I wasn't asking her for anything or whatnot, just getting her a beer.
I mean, stop. You don't even have to bring it up. I mean, you said keep personal stuff out of it, so let's do that. Don't stop bringing it up.
Okay. I was just being completely transparent on my end. Anyways, so
Right. Well, I appreciate that.
okay, so the one kind of video that you can watch are actual ships that are that are on that horizon line. Even when you zoom in using your P1000s or P900s, you can zoom in and you can literally see them disappearing. Now, it's not that they're getting smaller or anything like that. Like, their angular resolution is not changing. They are legit like being covered up by the curvature of the Earth. And that is actually the first inclination that we had, that we lived on a globe. You had these ancient mariners who would look at ships through their not telescopes. Their oh, what's the thing? What's the thing on ships? The I can't remember what they're called right now. Anyways, they were looking through basically like the monocle binoculars, if you will, and they would see the ships disappearing over the curve, and so that's our first inkling of it. So you mentioned earlier that Erasthenes is incorrectly used to prove that the Earth is a globe, and I can agree with you somewhat on the fact that it doesn't prove a globe, but what Erasthenes does is he was able to first estimate, like within a high percentage, or not high percentage, but like a low percent of error, like the circumference of the Earth. Of course, this needed an understanding that the Earth is a globe. But you see, the problem is that as you add more data points to that particular experiment, you see that the flat Earth actually gets destroyed in the evidence, because what you have is on a flat Earth you would have a linear progression of the shadow, but on a globe Earth, like in actual reality, you don't have a linear progression like of the shadow. If you add more points to it, the shadow gets longer and longer and longer because of the angular, not angular, but the angle of the rays that are hitting the Earth.
Okay, let's go back to angular resolution, because you basically I'm not gonna say you debunked it, but you kind of like toss it aside like there's no argument there. Yeah, it's been demonstrated many times now that things will disappear bottom up due to the angular resolution limit of your eye or the camera, whatever you're using to look at something. People have done experiments. They'll go to like a Walmart or some type of building with a nice flat hallway, long hallway. They'll get a flashlight and they'll walk to the other side of the hallway. And so on one side, you have a little flashlight and they place it on the floor. They go all the way to the other side of the hallway with a little camera, and they start to lower the camera closer and closer to the floor, pointed at the flashlight like 300 feet away. A presumably level floor, flat floor. Now, I know you guys say that level technically isn't flat. It's technically conforming to the center of gravity of the Earth, which fine, we'll concede that for half a second here. But it's a pretty flat floor. It's obviously it's measured with the Earth's curvature, but unless you're suggesting that at 300 feet of a hallway, there's substantial curve. Either way, so you're on this hallway. As they lower the camera closer to the floor, before the camera even hits the floor, it's out of view. It's gone because of the angular resolution limit and the diffraction limit of the camera. It's been repeated. Many people have done it. I want to go do it. And there's some pretty fascinating but very in-depth. I'm going to use the word science. You may not believe it, but I'm going to say there's hardcore science behind it. So I do not accept that angular resolution cannot cause things to disappear bottom up. I do not accept that.
So but could you explain the experiment again? Is this the experiment where like you have a quarter on the floor, and as you lower the camera, like it disappears because the quarter is flush with the floor?
No, I mean it might be similar. I've never heard of this quarter experiment, but no, you use a flashlight, put the flashlight on the floor, it's resting on the floor, and again you walk away 300 feet on a flat floor, unless the construction crew that builds Walmart floors don't know how to level floors properly. You walk 300 feet away from the flashlight with a camera. You point the camera to the flashlight all the way to the other side. And as you lower your camera, before your camera even touches the floor, the light will blink out of view, because that's how the physics of light and vision work. And I was surprised by this, but I heard about it recently. I saw a bunch of people doing videos, and it all seems pretty sound to me.
Okay, so let me get this straight real quick. First of all, you think that it's improbable that people that installed this floor or this hallway could have fucked up, and it has some bumps, or it has some not exactly level, stuff in it. You think that's improbable, and it's more probable that it's perfectly flat.
I mean, I think that the flashlight disappears out of view when the camera is inches above the floor.
Okay.
Um, and so I guess my point is that have to be a pretty fucking crooked ass floor. And again, people have
Oh.
done it on very different floors. People have done it in very different. It's not like they all just go to Walmart. Some people do it in like hallways at their offices and shit. Um, and the science that's given for why that's caused, not because the floor is uneven and crooked, but literally due to angular resolution, diffraction limits, and how light works with your camera, your aperture, or your eyeball, whatever the hell you're using to observe. That's the science makes perfect sense as to why that takes place. It makes perfect sense.
Okay, so you're trying to tell me that the same camera that you put like flush against the beach, let's say, in order to get it as flush with sea level as you can make it, has the ability to zoom in on ships that are miles away, literally miles away. But this same camera in a hallway on a floor that
Not the
could
same
or could
camera.
not be
It's not
not
the same
level
camera. It's not the same
has
camera.
apparently lost an
It's not the
object
same camera.
300 feet away.
It's not the same camera.
Well,
And here's the
regardless,
thing.
it's a
Here's the thing.
camera.
Here's how the diffraction limit works. The diffraction limit is dependent on the size of your aperture, and a bigger aperture will allow you to see further. So, for example, whereas let's say you do the same hallway experiment, you put a flashlight on the floor at one end, you walk 300 feet to the other side of the hallway, and let's say you have two different cameras. Let's say you have a little cell phone camera with a tiny little lens and a tiny little aperture. And you also have a big ass fucking P1000, like I have a P1000. If you start lowering your cell phone camera and the P1000, let's say you put them at the exact same height next to each other, you start lowering both cameras at the exact same height, at the exact same rate, the flashlight will disappear out of the small cell phone camera before it will disappear out of the Nikon P1000. In fact, at 300 feet with the Nikon P1000 placed literally on the floor, the flashlight will probably not disappear because it's still within the diffraction limit of the P1000 with its big ass aperture. Whereas your cell phone camera, for example, with a smaller aperture, has a much smaller diffraction limit. It's surprising, but I looked into it, for hours, and no one denies that cameras have diffraction limits. It's real. It's a real thing.
Okay, but what exactly does aperture like affect? I mean, do you know like what it
Yeah, well,
affects?
the aperture is like the opening through which light enters the camera or through which light enters, sorry, my screen froze, or through which light enters your eye. So the size of the aperture is different depending on the instrument you're using to observe. And the diffraction limit is basically dependent on how big the aperture is. I just said it. That's literally what it is. And the smaller the aperture size, the smaller the diffraction limit is. It's just the way it is. Just the way vision works. It ties into the Rayleigh criterion, ties into Airy's discs. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Okay, well, I mean, so the aperture actually deals with angular resolution or whatnot, like the resolution of the image, and it doesn't deal with the zooming in of things. Like for instance, when if you have like a camera like your P900 P1000, I don't know if it has like an automatic focusing thing, but that's what it's messing with is the aperture. It's messing with the aperture and it's causing it to focus, right? Aperture, whatever aperture.
Yeah. It's aperture. Yeah. Yeah. You can mess with the aperture. That is definitely part of what you can do. And you can manipulate the shutter speed to let more light in and all this great stuff. But I believe there's a default base limit, depending on whatever lens you're using, whether it's your eye, whether it is a P1000, there's a base limit, and adjusting the aperture, there's just a limit to that. And you can probably make it a little bigger, make it a little wider. And indeed, in these hallway experiments, you could probably mess with the aperture, and if you make the aperture smaller, you can probably cause the flashlight to disappear.
Okay.
So
well,
yeah.
I what I hear is a lot of hypothetical experiments
No, it's
that
not
you're kind of
hypothetical. People have done
conducting
it a
in your
million
head.
times with cameras and stuff.
Okay, well, I mean, I hear a lot of hypothetical experiments that you're conducting in your head and then proclaiming the results of those.
I'm sorry, what's hypothetical about people going out with cameras into hallways and doing it, multiple people doing it? What's hypothetical about that?
Well, for one thing, you claim that the two experiments there would use two different cameras. And you're not testing the one camera at the sea level to see how far it can see out. So if you had two P900s and you tested one in a hallway and one at sea level, as flush against the sea level as it can be, like you're hypothetically running those two experiments in order to see if that's the actual truth, and you're returning this conclusion that you haven't even actually tested. And I'm fairly certain that the P900 or P1000 in the hallway would not be able to see the flashlight due to the imperfections in the floor, but yet at sea level it could see for miles out, because I mean, how vision works is not the way that you think it works.
You don't even know what I'm talking about, bro. Like, you're saying this is just your crazy, unfounded hypothesis, but you don't even know what I'm talking about. You haven't even looked into it. So we can just be like, hey, we'll look into it and come back another time. We can just leave that.
We won't. We won't look into it, and we won't. I mean, because I'm not sitting here like pulling something out of my ass. I'm telling you that
I've looked into it. I've spent like 8 hours looking into it. So I'm not pulling it out of my ass, but I think it might have been one of the first times you've heard about it. And that's okay. I don't know everything you're going to say. You don't know everything I'm going to say. So if there's something you want to look into and come back later, okay, fine.
I'm telling you, I don't have to look into it because I know what the experiments would bring back, because I know how light actually operates.
Good luck, buddy. Go ahead and come back to me later when you look into it, and you tell me if your debunking here holds to the scrutiny and holds to the science. Good luck.
Okay, so why don't have you explained to me exactly why is it that ships disappear from bottom up? I know that you said that it was angular size or whatnot, but I mean, that doesn't actually explain it, because when you look at these experiments of ships going over, not experiments, these observations of ships going over the curve, you see them disappearing bottom up, but they don't get smaller from bottom up. Now, I'm kind of curious, do you think that we live in some kind of weird magical world where the ship's bottom goes infinitely faster away from you than it is towards you?
I'm sorry, you cut off. You cut off. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the last like 2 sentences?
Do you think that a ship, as it's going out of your eyesight, the bottom of the ship starts going infinitely faster and disappearing almost to show no discernible angular size like change, but then the top stays relatively close to you, but the bottom, and as it moves on up, like, do you think that it's like a freaking starship kind of drive that gets things out of our field of view? What do you think causes it to disappear but not get smaller?
That is literally what I was saying earlier. When you go out to these hallways and you perform these experiments, and I'll send you a link later so you can take a look and you can, look at it and see what you think. Multiple people have done it. People have gotten different aperture sizes, put them at the exact same height. The flashlight will disappear from the bottom. It will disappear from the bottom before the cameras even reach the floor. So that'd be some massive surface imperfections you're talking about over 300 feet. that the light would disappear out of view from from a cell phone camera just by raising it up like 8 inches off the floor. And then but when you lower it beneath like 5 or 6 inches, when you get below that little threshold, 5 or 6 inches off the floor, you can't see the flashlight anymore. So
Okay,
I don't know what else to tell you on this topic. I don't know what else to tell you.
You're pulling an equivalence fallacy here because the hallway is
No, I'm
not
not.
equivalent to
No, I'm not.
watching ships
No, I'm
disappear over the
not.
curve.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
No, yes,
Ships,
this is literally
things,
the definition of an equivalence fallacy.
so some dude who's some really smart dude. He did a presentation on this very topic: angular resolution, diffraction limits, all that good stuff. And he saw some of my observations. I was able to capture buildings that were 17 miles away, and he calculated, because it was a really clear day, and from what I understand, he looked up the temperatures that day when I caught that observation, and the temperature of the water was very similar to the temperature in the air that day. And so, according to him, because that was the same day, I can see like everything. Like, I mean, you can see everything. It was incredible. You can see everything. Now, you'll call it refraction, that's fine, but I could see everything. But as you got really, really far out, and we're talking like 20 or so, 17 to 20 miles, you could start to see things disappear bottom up. And by the way, it's supposed to be hidden by a lot more than what I could see. But you could start to see things slowly, like 30 feet or so. And this guy calculated the angular resolution limits involved, the distances, and based on the calculations of the diffraction limits, it was missing by how much it should be missing based on how this whole process works.
Okay. I still am not understanding how the angular resolution works in your particular world here, because angular. I mean, the angular. Hold on. The angular resolution is just how much of the objects from a distance that you can discern, like how visible, like how sharp are these images is what it is. It doesn't control like how like it disappearing or anything like that. And
we're also
if
talking
it,
about
hold on, if it were to,
limits,
then you would see a gradual change from top to bottom. Like you would see a gradual change from top to bottom, it getting smaller and disappearing, but you don't see that in reality. I'm wondering, why is it that when it goes from top to bottom, is there an instantaneous change?
It's really easy. It's been repeated many times. You literally see the flashlight disappear. The bottom disappears from your vision. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. It's been repeated. It's been done many times. I don't know what else to tell you.
Well, and I told you my problems with that.
All right. Well,
what are my problems? Tell me, what are my problems with that particular
the flashlight won't disappear bottom up. I don't know what else to tell you.
What are my issues with the hallway experiment?
You tell me. They're your issues.
Huh?
You tell me they're your issues.
I have already told you, and I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to see if you actually know.
Repeat it. If you want to hear it again, repeat it.
Okay, my problem with that is that you're in a hallway that could be, and most likely is, imperfectly constructed.
I know. Hey, listen. You want to believe that a flat level, professionally constructed hallway floor is full of so many imperfections that a camera 5 inches above the floor is not going to be able to see a flashlight 300 feet away. You want to believe that, then that's fine. And there's nothing else to say on this matter.
Okay. Well, I can see that we're at an impasse because you seem to want to use a 300-foot hallway and compare it to other things, and you're not also wanting to explain why things instantaneously disappear instead of getting smaller. I already told you
about a 17-mile observation, brother.
Huh?
Is my audio not going through well or something?
No, I'm talking, and then you're talking over me, but I continue talking because I was already
So 17 miles. Yeah, it's been demonstrated over 17 miles as well. Things disappearing bottom up. It could absolutely happen due to the diffraction limit. It's just that simple.
You're not explaining to me why it instantaneously disappears instead of gradually gets smaller.
It does.
It does not gradually get smaller. They instantaneously disappear bottom up.
Well, as something gets further away from you, it will start to disappear bottom up. You call that curvature when there's another explanation, unfortunately for you guys.
Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't catch that. What'd you say?
You say it disappears bottom up due to curvature,
Mm-hmm.
and there's another explanation for it.
Well, yeah, but if your explanation is angular resolution, I'm still saying that you're wrong.
Okay, congratulations, bro. And people can go check it out for themselves. I'm not trying to convince a cult member who hasn't even
I'm
looked into
not,
this
well,
deeply.
I mean, to be quite honest, I'm not trying to
You haven't even
convince
looked
you
into it. I spent like
either.
8 hours looking into it, and you've never even heard of it, and you're like, impossible. That's fine. Let the audience decide. I don't care.
Okay. You're like you're still not explaining the instantaneous change, and that's fine. We can move on to a different topic if you'd rather.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously, you haven't looked into it enough, so that's fine. Let's
No,
move
I
on.
have looked into it. You seem to be focused on the angular resolution, but that doesn't actually
You don't
describe
even
what you see in
understand.
reality.
The diffraction limit plays a role too. You keep saying angular resolution. That's part of it. Diffraction limits matter too, bro, with apertures.
Well, yeah, but none. Okay, listen, none of that
Dude, you didn't even know
explain.
how to pronounce aperture, bro. Go look into this a little deeper.
Are you really gonna shit on me for
Yeah,
mispronouncing a couple times? Like I
yeah,
pronounced it fine a
yeah.
couple of times, and I mispronounced it like one or two times, and then I jumped back on track. Like there's no reason to shit on me for how I pronounce shit.
Listen,
Okay?
don't shit on my mustache because it's a great mustache.
What?
Dude, I think the friend in your room heard it, but you didn't fucking hear it.
That's because the speaker is away from the mic so that you don't get feedback.
Anyways,
I'm trying to be
anyways, my
courteous.
mustache is great. Don't shit on my mustache, and maybe I won't shit on
Have
your
I shit
whatever.
on your mustache in this
Maybe I won't
conversation?
shit on your mustache. My mustache is fantastic, okay? I don't care what you
Have I
say.
shit on your mustache this entire conversation?
Listen, your mustache could look way better if you do what I do. I'm not even joking. That
I'm not
handlebar
gonna look like
shit,
Dick
no
Dastardly.
handlebar shit, dude. You got to do this. This is the only cool way to handle the mustache. Period. End
No.
of story. I don't care what anybody says.
Okay. So can you please explain gravity for me? Like, I figured that's probably one of the hangups that you have. I guess I should first ask: is gravity one of your hangups? And if so, can you explain why things fall without gravity?
First of all, is there any proof, scientific proof of gravity?
Yes, we have the scientific theory of gravity or gravitational force, and then there's also the law of gravity that mathematically describes the force.
Okay, how about a scientific evidence proving it?
Well, yeah, there's multiple bits of scientific evidence. I mean, obviously, there's the Cavendish experiment, which you're gonna not
Cavendish
like,
is not an experiment.
huh?
Cavendish is not an experiment.
Cavendish is an experiment, and
It's
it
not a
definitely
sci-
does
it's not a
prove that
scientific
matter
experiment.
attracts
It's not a
matter.
scientific experiment. It doesn't have proper considerations for independent, dependent variables. Let alone the fact that Cavendish stood how many meters away he stood from the little shack with the balls, and he looked at the balls through a telescope because he thought that his body, the gravitational mass of his body, was going to maybe hinder the balls in his shed. So he looked at it through a telescope, and yet they tell us that the tides on Earth are caused by the moon's gravity, but the moon is not going to maybe mess with Cavendish's balls in his shed, but he had to keep his little body far away. I mean, Cavendish is embarrassing, dude.
Okay, so you're basically shitting on Cavendish for isolating variables and whatnot, and
No,
trying to
no,
have a good
no.
experiment, but then you're also shitting on him for not isolating variables.
I did not say that that the problem with Cavendish was that he isolated variables. He
No, no, no,
failed
no,
to
no. You
do
said
it.
the problem
He
is he
failed to
didn't
do it
isolate
according to
variables.
the scientific method properly.
No, you say that he didn't isolate variables, and so you say that that's a problem with it, but then you shit on him for isolating a variable.
Um, the moon affects the tides, but it won't affect his balls in a shed.
The moon does affect the tides. That's you're comparing two things of different sizes.
No, I'm
there.
not. He moved his body away because he was afraid that his body would affect the
Do you
experiment, the
think Cavendish
gravitational
is as
mass,
big as the
but
moon?
he made no considerations for the moon's gravitational mass.
Do you think Cavendish is as big as the moon?
That's not the point. That's actually, wait a
No, that's
minute. That
actually
is
the
my
point.
point. That is my point. The Earth, the moon is going to have a massive effect. If it's affecting tides, why won't it disrupt his little balls in a shed experiment that he had to stand 300 meters away from because he was afraid he was going to mess with it? It's a joke.
Okay, do you know why he would have done that?
He would have done it because he thought that it was going to inhibit the experiment. Meanwhile, the moon is probably affecting it the way it affects the tides. So it's a joke.
So, can you explain the law of gravity for me?
The law of gravity. I don't care to within your paradigm. There's no proof that gravity exists.
Well, don't you kind of have to know my paradigm in order to suggest that my paradigm doesn't explain shit?
Well, I don't care about your law versus your, like you mentioned law versus mathematical proof of gravity and all this stuff. I want you straight up hardcore scientific method 101. Prove that gravity exists. And there's, come on, man. You never see, we don't, at best, there's a downward force, which obviously there's a lot of dispute, and I'm not even sure what side of the fence I sit on this topic, but I believe that, hey, there's probably a downward force. Why not? There's a downward force. Now, there isn't a force to center mass like, the globe model requires. A lot of flat earthers will say it's just buoyancy and density. I tend to think, you know what? There's probably buoyancy, density, and there's probably a downward force. Why the hell not? There's a downward force all across this potential flat earth. Because again, I'm just a globe skeptic, not a flat earther.
Okay, can you explain the formula for the buoyant force?
Do you know Einstein's theory of relativity, but do you know the actual equations behind it?
Well, I mean, no, but I'm also not trying to use that in order to say
Okay,
that Einstein
cool.
was wrong or anything like that.
Cool. Just want to
I
make
don't
sure
have
it's
to
on. I
know that.
gotcha.
These are
Okay.
basic things. Like, I'm not bringing up special relativity or general relativity or anything like that. Like, you don't have to know those things in order to, like, prove that gravity is an actual thing. So,
Right.
the
And my point is just that you don't have to know the equations to understand the principles at work in something. So if you
Well,
want to
no, I mean
ask me what the
you do
formula,
have
if
to
you want
know
to
the
ask me what the
equations in
formula
order to
is,
know the
go ahead, ask
forces
me the formula.
that are at
If you want
effect.
to ask me the formula, go ahead, ask me. Go for it.
Okay, so I mean, you realize that like the buoyant force requires gravity or this dropity, as you put it, to exist. Like, because the buoyant force requires some force like pulling down on an object. Like objects are attracted to each other. That's what Cavendish proved. And since objects are attracted to each other, we can calculate those exactly. Now, in order to suggest that reality doesn't work the way that we've known it to, you need to come up with a some kind of mathematical formula that rivals the law of gravity to explain that attraction, that force between a couple of things. And so everything that has matter in the universe attracts to other matter. And we can measure this and exactly calculate how much force it is. But you're throwing that all out the window. And that's why you don't need to bring Einstein into this or anything
Are you
like
done, dude?
that.
I thought you were.
These
Are
are
you done yet?
basic concepts.
Are you done yet?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I say, why can't there just be a downward force? We never experience things pulling to center of mass. You can go anywhere on the so-called globe Earth. You can travel. You'll never see curvature, by the way. You'll never see it. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson says you can't see from 128,000 feet altitude, let alone 35,000 feet from your average commercial airliner. You'll never see curvature. You'll never feel it. You can travel all around the so-called globe. You'll never feel it. And what you call gravity I just call a universal downward force.
The
That's all
theory
it
of
is.
dropity.
Sure, whatever you want. But I sure as hell have never experienced things pulling to the center of mass.
You experience something pulling to the center of mass every single day.
Center of mass is different than down, bro.
Center of mass is different than down. That's why Australians don't hang upside down on a ball.
Well, the direction of gravity, the direction of the drop, the direction of the pull changes directions for people in Australia compared to people in North America, for example.
Well, yeah,
I
and that's
don't
explained by
experience
gravity.
I don't experience down ever changing direction. I could get on a 12-hour flight, fly halfway around the so-called globe, and down is always under my feet. I could, going 500 miles an hour on an airplane, I could have the flight attendant could roll on out. She could pour me a beverage, and I could sip the beverage, and I won't even spill a drop as I'm going around the curve, supposedly. Down is all we ever experience. You're telling me that down changes directions. I'm saying all I ever experience is down.
Do you know why down changes direction?
Duh. Because
So,
gravity, according to your model, pulls to the center of mass.
right, gravity pulls the center of mass. So, if you're on a globe and you go around the globe and gravity is pulling to the center of mass, where is down constantly?
Well, on your model, it changes direction, bro.
Well, no, it doesn't necessarily change direction because it's always right beneath your feet because down is
It
always
changes
pointing towards the
direction,
center
bro.
of
It
gravity,
changes direction. Don't
the
deny it
center
changes
of the
direction.
earth.
It's gonna look really bad for you, dude. Don't deny that. It changes direction, bro.
Well, no, no, it does not change direction. It always pulls like when you say that gravity pulls to the center of mass, then gravity is not changing direction.
Okay, I'll put it to you like this. Let's say you have somebody standing in North America, right? They drop an apple out of their hand and it starts heading in a direction. And let's say that that apple, let's just say it heads in that direction for infinity. Just it keeps going forever. Then you have somebody on the other side of the globe in Australia. They drop an apple. And imagine that that apple keeps moving in that down direction to the center of Earth. It keeps going. Those are two different directions.
No, they're not.
All right, how about this? Let
What
me ask you
what
this.
is okay?
Let me
Listen,
ask you this.
what is
Let me
the
ask you this.
direction that
Let me
you
ask you this
just
question. Let me ask
described?
you this question.
Describe that direction for me,
Are
real quick.
people in Australia, are their heads, if somebody in Australia points up and somebody in North America points up, are they pointing in the same direction?
No, because we're on a globe and they're pointing the direction of up. Are you talking about whether they would be pointing like at the same constellations or something like that? Then no, they wouldn't be. They're pointing in the relative direction of up, which is different for every person on the earth. Up, down, left, right, those are relative.
Yes, and that was my point with the apple as well. Down is a different direction depending on what side of the globe you're on. Like, yes, you can say that down is technically towards the center of the earth. Nobody's denying that. But the direction of things falling are changing direction, physical, actual direction. The direction of the fall is different. The orientation is different.
You're looking at it from a reference frame that's outside of the globe Earth and specifically in that three-dimensional plane where that vector is pointing. But within the reference frame of the person on the globe, the vector of that direction will always be pointing like down towards the center of mass of the Earth. So
Right,
it's
down.
not changing direction.
It
It's
is
still
changing
pointing towards
direction.
the center of mass, which is the direction.
Yeah, it's obvious. I mean, this is so elementary and obvious that, I mean, I don't know how anybody, I mean, other than a brainwashed cult member could not see right through it. And I'm not saying you, I'm just saying anybody who doesn't get it, who's watching, I mean, it should be very obvious. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. it seems like you're defining direction strictly by center of mass. And that's not what I'm talking about. My point is simply, no matter where I go on Earth, at any point in my life, even if I get on a plane, and according to Neil deGrasse Tyson, you can't see curvature on a plane from 35,000 feet. Red Bull jump guy couldn't even see it. But I'm sure there were a bunch of science dorks who were like, yeah, look, you see the curve from space, Red Bull jump. And then, no, apparently you can't see from that high, according to Neil deGrasse Tyson. I can get on a plane. I can fly around the so-called globe, but the sense of where down is, which will change its direction depending on what side of the globe you're on, I never feel that. All I ever feel is down. I never see curve. I never feel like I'm going around a curve. All I feel is down, 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 down. That's it.
Okay, well, still, down's relative, and I do like how you still haven't explained like the exact mechanism or anything like that for this dropity. How would you like if I punched a wall? How would you like measure the force of that? Because I mean, we have to know these things in order for a lot of things to work in this reality. Calculating the force of something, the static forces of a single system. Me being an engineer, I had to learn all of that shit while I was going through college. So I'm kind of curious, how exactly do you calculate that force in your world? Because to me, you wouldn't be able to calculate it.
Are you talking about punching a wall? Or are you talking about like what you're calling dropity?
I mean, it's the same thing. The downward force, gravity, that's a force, just like my hand hitting the wall, my
Obviously,
palm smacking in
obviously.
my face.
Yeah, obviously. Well, you know what? If everywhere on Earth it's what is it, 9.8 meters squared? Is that the rate of fall according to gravity?
Yes.
Right. And if that is experientially, scientifically proven to be true at any point on the globe, it wouldn't surprise me if it varies in some places. Does it vary?
Yes, it does vary.
Yeah, I figured it would. Um, then the way I see it, here's my thing. My thing is why. See, I don't deny that things drop. Duh, obviously, I don't deny that there's a 9.8 meters per second. It's a square drop. I don't deny that. I mean, you'd have to be insane to deny that things fall and it's predictable and it's testable and it's repeatable. Where I have a difference with you and the Globers in general is that you guys aren't just saying it's falling, you're saying it's being pulled to the center of mass. So the way I see it, the numbers and the math that you guys use to describe the rate at which things fall could generally probably simply be applied to this universal downward thing that we can feel and we can experience no matter where we are on the earth. And by the way, I mean, you'll never see curvature as you travel across the earth. I mean, you can't see from 35,000 feet. So you can go anywhere on earth and you can test that things fall to your feet. But I don't see where curvature gets added into the equation there.
So what exactly is the connection between curvature and dropity?
Well, for you guys, things are being pulled to a center of mass.
Right.
And I say, well, if it turns out we don't live on a globe, then the phenomenon of things dropping could just be a universal downward force. Why not? If there's a gravity force that's pulling things to the center of mass, why can't there be a downward force? I mean, here's a question. In video games, when they program video games, Elon Musk, he's a big fan of simulation theory. He says we might be living in a simulation theory. The average video game is made on a flat map. That the world, play like Skyrim or something, it's a flat map. And I mean, I don't know shit about programming, but are they using gravity, things pulling to the center of mass, as the formula to create the in-game physics of things falling down on a flat map? Or are they just using some kind of universal map-wide downward force? Not to center of mass, just down. So I just say, why do we have to introduce a ball, a globe, set pulling to the center of mass? Why can't we just have a flat plane with a universal downward force, and that's it? And yeah, that's what
Okay,
I think.
first of all, physics engines do use gravity in their calculations. I mean, in order to get a good model, in order to, I guess, please people that are playing games, you would have to consider gravity and all of that, or this dropity that you're talking about there.
On a flat map
Now,
video game. They're on
oh
a flat
god
map
damn
video
it.
game. They're using gravity on a flat map. They're using gravity.
I'm saying that in video games and physics engines, they definitely do use gravity and they take gravity into consideration when playing these games or when
It's gravity.
programming these games. Now,
It's gravity
if you will, you talk for like five
force.
minutes. Can I please talk?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So in your whole diatribe here, you seem to think that this dropity or this downward force only acts on specific objects, mainly just objects, I guess, that are on the surface of the Earth and not like the ground or anything below it. So, I mean, do you think that like dropity only happens above the surface? Or do you think it
No.
doesn't affect like the ground?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Why not? Yeah, of course.
Okay, so extrapolating from that, if you have like why do you if you have such a wide like a huge flat earth, if everything is pulling down, why is it that like it hasn't crumbled off? Like why don't the edges crumble off? Why don't things crumble into, well, I would say a sphere, but you deny that it's being pulled to the center of mass. So exactly what is this theory of dropity doing? What is the exact theory? Just shit falls down? Is that all that is, or do you have some kind of actual formalized theory that explains why it falls down? Why don't things fall to the left or the right? Why don't they fall up? Like, what is making things fall down? On the theory of gravity, we have an explanation because mass attracts mass. We have this formula that can calculate the force of attraction between two objects. And because the Earth is so massive, the force of gravity on any one person pulls it to the center of the Earth and keeps them on the Earth. That's what allows us to stay here and not fall off the Earth. And it also allows us to keep an atmosphere. So, I mean, you have to understand that you're being this globe skeptic over there,
Yeah,
but at the
triggered.
same
They
time,
get
you're not
they get triggered by
actually
that.
giving me good explanations as to why these things happen.
They don't like it when
Whereas my model, the existing consensus, can fully explain why
no
these
one's
things happen.
intimidated by your appeal to consensus.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What?
No one's intimidated by your appeal to consensus.
Okay, I didn't only appeal to consensus. I explained why the theory
No,
of
I
gravity.
know, but you did it again. I just wanted to hit that little point. Okay, so let me go through all the stuff you said because you went on a big diatribe there. Okay, God, where do I even start? I mean, um, so I mean, what do you want from me? You want a mathematical formula to explain the universal downward force, which is the only thing we ever can experience and observe?
Well, I mean, a mathematical formula would be great. I doubt that you have one, but just an explanation as to why things are compelled to fall down rather than to the left, to the right, or up, or any of
Well, I
these other
already
ways.
told you that maybe it's just because that's the way the universe is, and you might be like, well, how does that work? Well, okay, if I ask you how does gravity work, and you're gonna tell me, oh, everything pulls the center of mass, and then I can ask you again, okay, well, how does that work? So I will ask you, how does that work?
Well, I mean, that's where special relativity comes in because mass displaces space time and it causes that space time to warp and be pulled towards the larger like warps in space time. Like that's one way to think of it. Now, if
Okay,
you're thinking
and why does that happen?
because matter displaces space time, space and time are linked.
Right, and why is it that warping space-time pulls things down? Why? What is it in the properties of space and time that has that feature built into it?
Okay, so for one thing, it doesn't just pull things down; it pulls things towards the center of gravity, like the center of mass.
Yeah, we
So
know.
have you ever seen like those little quarter little attractions, like you go to a mall or some kind of amusement park or something like that? You put the quarter at the very top of it, you drop it, and it goes around the sides and
Yeah,
until
yeah,
it
yeah. I've
drops
seen
into the
that. Yeah,
bucket.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, it kind of works on a similar principle to that. Like, I mean, as you get closer to this center of mass, you're compelled, like you're pulled towards it because, that's just how it works. I don't know how else to explain it to you. I mean, it's not like it's just like I'm sorry. I don't know how else to explain
Well,
it. Like, I don't know how
here
to
was the point
explain
I
it to
was.
like a 5 year
Here's
old.
the point I was trying to make. I didn't even really need an answer from you because the reason I kept asking you that question was because eventually, I can ask you indefinitely. Well, what causes gravity to do what it does, and then what causes space time to do what it does, and then if you give me an answer to that, I could be like, well, what causes that to do what it does? My point is that you're asking me for an explanation of how everything has a downward force, and I just say that's it. It just has it. You don't have to go any deeper. Just like again,
No, but you do.
I'm going to go to the video game example with the video game. You tell me they have gravity in video games, but in my understanding, gravity pulls to the center of mass. So I don't understand how you could have a flat map in a video game that's abiding by a curved globular pull to the center of mass
Okay.
force on the video game map. I bet they're probably using something that puts a 9.8 meter squared drop all across the map, all across the flat map.
Yes,
That's probably
gravity.
right, but
The,
gravity makes things spherical, not a flat map in a video game. So obviously, if they were using gravity, and this actually goes back to down changing directions depending on what side of the globe you're on. If they're using gravity on a flat map, then something that drops straight to your feet on one side of the map will drop at an angle to the center wherever you have this center of mass on a flat map. So it doesn't make any sense.
you know, I feel like this is going nowhere. Because I mean, you're basically comparing almost apples to oranges here because I'm sitting here telling you, explaining to you how gravity and its explanation differs from your theory of dropity, and you're basically describing gravity to me right now when you're talking about these simulations and shit, which are human made and therefore can be made to do anything. But physics engines definitely use gravity in order to do their calculations.
Hey, you want to know what probably did use gravity? Super Mario Galaxy. Have you ever heard of Super Mario Galaxy?
Yes, I've heard of Super Mario Galaxy.
I mean, Mario, and all some people say my mustache looks like Mario's, whatever. On Super Mario Galaxy, um, Mario, they literally the maps are on spheres, and Mario, he's on the little sphere and he's running, and he can circumnavigate the sphere. He goes upside down and around. He can circumnavigate the sphere. They're small little globes. You can Mario could walk around it in like 20 seconds. There's like small globes. They probably use gravity for that. But my question is, if you're using pulling to the center of mass in Super Mario Galaxy to get Mario to stick to the underside of this globe as he's moving around it, well, what are they using on a flat map like so many video games are using a flat map? I'm just saying gravity pulls to the center of mass and makes things a globular shape for that reason. On a flat map in a video game, I think it's a good question. What are they using? Is it just a universal downward 9.8 meters squared force?
Which is gravity. Gravity is a universal thing that happens everywhere.
telling me there's no difference between gravity and things pulling down everywhere on a flat Earth?
No, I'm saying a flat Earth doesn't exist because gravity pulls everything to the center of mass, and therefore a flat Earth isn't possible.
Right, but we're not talking. You're asking me about what my views are on this, what you call dropity, which I just call universal downward force. After all, it's all we ever experience.
Why?
We don't ever,
I don't
we
understand
don't ever,
why you're bringing
we
up
don't
video
ever
games as
feel
if they're
that down in
representative
the
of
direction
reality.
on the other side of the globe. We never feel that. We never feel that.
Why are you trying to use video games and sizes in video games that do not actually represent like the situation in reality as far as the globe Earth
First of
is
all,
going? Like what? Hold on, I'm talking. Please, I'm
told me
talking.
video
I'm
games
talking.
use gravity.
I'm
You told
talking.
me that. And I'm telling you that there's a difference between pulling to the center of mass and things pulling down on a flat map. You're telling me that video games use pull to the center of mass gravity, and I'm telling you that it doesn't really make sense on a flat simulation video game. It's not that I'm deflecting to some bizarre, obscure video game analogy. It's that you said video games use a pull to the center of mass gravity formula, and I'm telling you that how the hell are things pulling to a center of mass on a flat video game map? It doesn't make sense.
Well, again, I don't know why we're talking about video games.
Okay,
I
let's
don't
move
have
on.
intimate knowledge as to how these video
Let's move
games are
on. What else you
being
got? What
made
else you
or
got, man?
constructed. Physics
Let's move
engines
on. What else
use
you got, man?
gravity.
Everybody in the audience gets it. Let's move on. What else?
I like how you said, "Hey, I'm not going to watch the chat," but now you know everybody in the audience is getting it.
I'm not watching the chat, buddy. I'm assuming they get it.
Okay, just like you assumed those experiments worked out exactly like you thought they did. So if we can move on from this whole video game talk that doesn't actually help us out with this, this whole dropity thing, because I mean you're basically explaining gravity with saying that gravity doesn't exist, which seems to be a Poe-ish kind of thing. So I'm on the verge of saying, hey, you're just a Poe and you don't sincerely believe any of this shit.
That's fine. That's fine, bro. That's not what I said, but move on. Let's go.
Okay, what is another point of contention that you have with the globe Earth model, so that we can move on?
Okay, let's see here. Where do we begin with it? The hilarious coincidence that the sun and the moon appear to be the same size, but it turns out that they're actually the sun. The sun is actually 400 times bigger than the moon, but because it's also 400 times further away from us, they only appear to look the same size because of that stunning cosmic coincidence that, according to you guys, blew up for no reason out of a big bang. But what a coincidence that they appear to be the same size. That's just funny. I mean, that you have to have a lot of faith to believe in that coincidence.
I mean, it's all about perspective, but I'm guessing you're going to shit on that too.
You mean that there's so many billions of galaxies, so it's not really a coincidence kind of thing?
No, meaning that the moon is a certain distance away from the Earth, and the sun is 93 million miles away, which the moon is what, 240,000 miles away or whatnot, and then the sun is 93 million miles away. And so from our perspective here on the face of the Earth, the moon on occasion seems to be just the same size as it. In the past, the moon would have appeared bigger, and in the future, the moon will not appear at the same size as
Sorry,
as
how
the
long
sun
ago?
in the sky.
In the past, how long ago are you talking about?
I mean, at any point in the past when the moon was close enough to be bigger than the sun, from
Are you talking
our
about like a billion
perspective here
years?
on